All right, welcome everybody to another episode of Tennis Channel Inside In on the Tennis Channel Podcast Network. Mitch Michals from our Santa Monica studios into the month of December, putting a bow on 2024. But what a year it was for a couple different players, including the player that our guest now is coaching. She, our guest on this week's show, played her first professional match at age 14, retired in tennis as a player in 2017, has been a groundbreaking coach for several of the WTA's top stars, including her current successful run with Marta Kostyuk, who has had the career year she's been hoping for in 2024. Welcome to the show right now. First time on the podcast, Sandra Zaniewska. Sandra, it's been a long time coming. Looking forward to chatting with you.
Yeah, thank you, Mitch, for having me. I'm excited.
I'm excited too. A lot of different things to go over, a lot of topics to talk about. But starting with this, I mentioned the time, December. Tennis has the shortest off season in the history of all sports. So how has this month been? How is, this being your time to maybe shine as a coach? What's the off season been like for you and Marta and your off season in general?
Yeah, I mean, this is the time where, we put in the work for the next season. So we were lucky this year because Marta had quite some time off. We both had a month off. And then we easily kind of eased into the preseason, starting with fitness, now focusing a little bit more on tennis, but everything's going well. Yeah, we're actually looking forward to the next season and playing some matches again.
Do you have like a structure for off season? I'm curious too, because the inner workings of tennis is very fascinating, especially to a lot of our listeners. But is there a plan like, okay, we're going to do a certain couple, like a week on fitness, then go right in order to parts of your game? If you could talk through maybe how it works, or if it is unique to each player, what the off season strategy is.
It definitely is unique to each player, but basically we have to break it down in terms of what worked this year, what didn't work, what do we want to accomplish next year, and what do we need to get there. So it's always beginning of the off season or planning the off season. It's like brainstorming with the team and with the fitness coach, but also with the physio, or we have an osteopath to see what are the things that needs to be done to bring Marta to the next level. And then yes, from there we just make a plan and we go for it.
Yeah. And as a coach, right, like the best thing is entering the off season healthy. Like that's just like gold for you, right? Like there's nothing to worry about. You can hit the ground running. You don't have to manage anything. You can start fresh.
Exactly, healthy and rested, because sometimes, and that's what the ATP guys have. I mean, their season is so long that I cannot imagine. They probably have just like a couple of days off and they're right back into it. But yeah, we're lucky that Marta had this time to rest, not just physically but also mentally. And yeah, she was actually excited to come back in and missing it a little bit. And that's always what you want to have from a player, that they miss it just a little bit before the start.
So, Sandra, your upbringing is a fascinating one, even for tennis speak, because growing up in Poland, you had a brother. You got into tennis at age 10, right? Is that like you kind of discovered the game later than most? And I bring up the timeline. You discovered it at 10. You played your first pro match, 4 years later?
Yeah, actually, I don't remember my first pro match, so you'll have to remind me about this one. But yeah, I discovered it when I was 10 and it was a complete accident. I always loved sports and I played, I think, all of them and anything I could get my hands on. I had an older brother who was skateboarding and I wanted to I wanted to follow in his footsteps. So I asked my mom to get me a skateboard. She was like, nope, no way. Not for girls. Plus it's dangerous. We're not doing that. But in the end, I convinced her to get me one. And when we were getting the skateboard at the store, she met a friend that she hasn't seen for many, many years. And she found out that her son was playing tennis. So she decided to take me to the tennis court instead. And that's how it started. I fell in love with it. And it's been in my life ever since.
Yeah, would you say you were a kid described as not lacking energy? Energy was on high demand for you as a kid?
Yeah, I mean, it was crazy. Actually, the first coach that I had, my mom always came to him and said, "Can you please just make her run like for this 1 hour on the court as much as possible, so that she wastes her energy? Because we just don't want to deal with that at home." So
Mhm.
this was pretty much the primary goal of tennis and my practices at the beginning.
And I've heard you say in other interviews how tennis had caught you and as a player, now a coach, because of the responsibility involved. You're taking, such ownership of what you do, your craft. There's also that individual aspect where you can't rely on anybody else. Did you feel like it taught you lessons that you can apply to other areas of your life, how responsible you have to be as a tennis player?
Yeah, I think it's in a way it's a blessing and a curse at the same time, because if you have the responsibility, that it's all in your hands. So if you do a good job, probably the result is going to be good.
Yeah.
If you slack on somewhere, it's not going to be good. But at the same time, you are the only one that you need to control. So I feel like, whether it's on the tennis court or in life, it applies to everything, right?
Yeah.
The better you can, in a way, control yourself, the more hard work and the more determination you put into things, the better they're going to generally work out.
Yeah. Do you have any strong feelings one way or the other on the on-court coaching debate? Because in watching your matches with Marta's matches where you're there's maybe a dialogue. I wouldn't say you're necessarily giving her firm instructions. We know how hard the work is before the match, preparing someone for the test. But it seems like in your case, you're there to give guidance, but not necessarily coaching nonstop and throughout the match. Do you have strong feelings one way or the other on the on-court coaching debate?
I think, the fact that we can coach right now, it makes things easier because there is no, the umpires don't need to wonder anymore, hey, was this coaching or was it just supporting,
Yeah.
what it was? So it makes it easier. I was more a fan of the on-court coaching that we had walking on the court during the changeovers, the once a set. I think that was more fun also for the spectators. So I'm generally more of a fan of that. But yeah, I think if I had to pick one, coaching or no coaching, I would say no coaching because it's just the tradition of the sport. You're there on the court alone, and there is so little also sometimes that you can give to the player when you're on court, especially when you're on those big stadiums. I mean, we
Yeah.
laugh at Marta all the time that I'm talking and she just goes, I cannot hear anything, and I'm screaming my lungs out and I'm like, okay, I cannot say it any louder. So there is so much
Yeah.
that just doesn't get through to the player in the end. So yeah, I would say that it's probably better without, but hey, if it's
Yeah.
there, I'm going to use it.
Right. It's a tool. If you might not necessarily fully agree or support with it, but it's there, might as well use it. I completely understand that. Your upbringing too, when you started to play as a pro and you got heavily involved in the game as a player, what was it like in Poland at the time? Now it's a little different. Iga's come up, Hubie Hurkacz, the culture's maybe a little more advanced. But what was it like? We know the Radwanska sisters, Aga and Ursula. We know that there was some tradition there going forward. But what was your individual experience like in Poland playing the game at a high level?
There was not many courts. Tennis was not really popular, and I was very lucky that I was practicing in one club in Poland with basically the second best player of my age. There were three of us. It was me, it was Paula Kania, and Magda Linet. Magda is still
Yeah.
playing
Yeah.
and doing great. Paula is not playing anymore, but we were a very strong age group, so we were very lucky to have each other and to keep pushing each other up. And me and Paula, we were actually in one club, so we were practicing together, and that I feel like has helped tremendously because there hasn't been many players in general, to practice with, or coaches on a high level as well. So it was, it was basically you were just going alone, hoping that something good is going to come up.
Well, it's very, very cool, and something to be proud of. Obviously, that you made it from a country that didn't have the tradition at the time. Now is building it, but a harder road to travel than some other countries, even here in America, where there's more of a pathway. But what was something too, and I know you had your pro experience playing the pro game for over a decade. Looking back now that it's been some time, what was one of the biggest challenges or obstacles to pro tennis that maybe you weren't ready for, prepared for? Looking back, it was maybe a little tougher to deal with as a young professional.
For me, at the very beginning, it was the loneliness. I was traveling most of the time by myself. I didn't have a coach, and my parents were working. So, even when I started playing professionally at age 16, 17, more of those tournaments, I was going alone. And at the very beginning, it was the experience between, professional tennis and juniors was huge. It was like you could not even compare the two. So I felt so lonely. And I remember at I think it was my first tournament abroad, professional. It was in Belgium. I was calling my mom. I'm like, I don't want to do this, like it makes no sense. Nobody talks to each other. I'm here with girls that are, double my age, and they're still just, trying, grinding. I'm like, I didn't think that this would look this way. So these were the initially tough parts of just breaking through to the tour.
Yeah, the mental side of tennis is just such a challenge. They don't prepare you for the time you're not playing, right? Like when you can prepare to play tennis, but there's still 22 hours in the day to plan and to schedule. And then going on that regard, I mean, your pro career ended, you pulled the plug on it and walked away at age 25. Did you feel like it was time then? Were there injuries? Was it the financial burden? What was the decision? What went through the decision process to stop playing professionally?
Yeah, there were plenty of injuries ever since I had my best year when I was 20 years old. Then it was just, I would get healthy and get injured again, get healthy, get injured again. So it was like this constant spiral that it was really tough for me mentally at one point. And I was like, okay, it's in a way it makes no sense to keep going because I feel like my body cannot handle going where I want to go in tennis. But at the same time, I didn't know what else to do. So
Yeah.
it was, I was a little bit stuck at that time. And yeah, I was lucky back then that, I started working with Petra. Also something that was not planned at all because I didn't want to stay in tennis. And I've been in tennis ever since.
Yeah, and that was the first coaching thing. It's funny, Petra Martic, who you were her coach when she made that run in 2019 to the Roland Garros quarterfinals. And I wanted to ask you about the genesis of that because it sounds like it, and you could correct me, it sounds like it just kind of organically happened. You were friends. She said in interviews, I heard Sandra talking about tennis, and I was like, oh, this girl knows what she's talking about. So was it as simple as just a friend needed a coach and you happened to be there, right place, right time?
Yeah, pretty much. And right place, right time is exactly what happened because when she was coming back, she had no ranking. And I was playing all the, ITF tournaments, the 25Ks, 50Ks, and she's been playing some of the same ones. And she didn't know the players there, but I knew them because, I was a regular there. So I would always tell her, hey, with this one, you got to watch out for this. This one, maybe you pay attention to that. And then, yeah, she really said,
Yeah,
like, hey, I really like the way you see tennis. Do you want to come with me here and there? And the first year it was here and there, it was just the
yeah.
slams, and from the year after we went full time, and yeah, the rest is history.
Do you think you, like looking at it from a bigger viewpoint, from a 20,000-foot view, do you think you see the game differently, more creatively than others? Like, do you think you have a unique perspective even among tennis players, tennis coaches?
That's hard to say, but I would say that I think when I was a player, I felt very misunderstood by coaches because I had, my game style was, you would, for a lack of a better comparison, you would compare it to a men's game, heavy forehand. I could kick, I could come to the net, I could play a drop shot. And coaches were always telling me that I need to be more aggressive and were trying to make my game more like a woman's game, to hit harder and flatter. But that never worked. I never had results this way. And I felt so misunderstood as a player that when I started with Petra, which obviously she has a very similar game style, so that was I think a blessing for me at the very
Yeah,
beginning because I really felt the way she
right,
wanted to play and the player that she was. And I kind of didn't want a player to feel the way I felt, so I
right.
really tried to understand how the player sees themselves and what they think their best game is like, and then take their vision together with what I see from outside and then try to kind of find a middle ground and create a vision together for their game.
Right. I agree with that completely. I think tennis is better when there's more creativity, when there's more different approaches. Funny too, a couple months ago on this podcast, Sandra, I talked to Daniil Medvedev's coach, Jill Servar, and he was saying, like, I'm coaching one of the most unique players in all of tennis. I can't just force him into a box of my coaching style. There needs to be more collaboration. So it makes total sense. I just think from your perspective, your story leading into your coaching career, you saw that there's not one way to coach a player, that you have to be adaptable because your style was your style. It's nobody else's. It's just yours.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, I think that we as coaches, especially when we coach professional players, we have to look at who they are and also what they want, right? Because at the end of the day, they are the ones that are hitting balls and they're on the court. So they need to be happy and they need to be convinced about how they're playing and what they're doing on the court. Otherwise, it's just not going to work as well as.
Yeah. Did you think your coaching, development, your coaching journey, because I know before we get to the relationship with Marta, you spent a year at the Mortagu Academy. You worked with Alize Court 2 years. Yeah. 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 You spent some time there. You were, kind of getting an apprenticeship, if I have that right, where you were able to learn the inner workings of not just coaching, but dealing with players and being around the game at a high level. How valuable was that experience for you?
Yeah, I don't think this experience I can compare to anything because 2 years spent at the academy, I feel like it gave me more experience that I would have gotten with for 10 or 15 years with one player on the tour. I've seen so many players, but of different ages. But not only that, I also saw so many coaches, and I was so close to Patrick as well that all of this was like a huge wave
Yeah.
of information coming my way every day. So the growth I feel that I went through through those 2 years at the academy was immense, really.
We got Sandra Zaniewska here on Tennis Channel Inside In talking to Marta Kostyuk's coach, who has accomplished great things on the Tennis Channel Inside In podcast. Speaking about that partnership, it's been coming up on going into year 3 or year 2.5, I should say. But Wimbledon 2023, Sandra, was when it all started. I believe over an interview over breakfast. But how did the genesis of that come to be? Where Marta Kostyuk looking for a coach, a great prospect, obviously. How were you in the orbit? I know, timing is everything, and this is another example of great timing for you. But how did everything work out at Wimbledon 2023 where it came to be that you would be her coach?
To be honest, I don't know who else was in the orbit, but that's a great thing I'm going to ask Marta tomorrow. Because now I'm curious as well. But pretty much her agent came up to me, and said that she spoke to Marta and her mom. And obviously, Marta's mom, Talina, has been her coach for most of her life and has been there on and off the court with her. So, she had already a strong female presence in her life on the court from the very beginning. And we had that breakfast, we had a conversation about what we both wanted to achieve in tennis. And we wanted to see if we click a little bit. Started a 10-day trial period. It worked out well. Then went together for the American and Asian swing, and we are going strong ever since then.
On the prospect side of things, what stood out? There's a lot about Marta's game to like. There's also other elements, the intangibles. But what stood out to you as a coach when you said, "All right, I'm going to take this job"? What was the most intriguing thing about Marta as a prospect, someone you could work with?
For me, Marta had everything. And I always said, for many years already before that, I was like, this girl, she can be unbelievable. I mean, she already was when she was so young, so that it's not like, it was clear that she had potential, right? And the potential for me is everywhere. Like, she's a great mover. She has great intuition on court. She can play almost any shot. She can come to the net. And good serve, good forehand, good backhand, like really everything is there. She's such a well-developed player that I feel like the sky's the limit with her.
You said in the quote, and I'm going to read this directly, that she's like your twin, 10 years younger. And I was hoping you would elaborate on that, what that means.
She reminds me a lot of myself when I was younger. I think our characters are very, very similar. We're both very extroverted and open and high energy people. So, sometimes, when I look at her, I have to laugh, It's like when I spoke to my mom and sometimes I tell her about Marta, she always says like, "Oh, now you get the taste of your own medicine," after all those years. And I'm like, I kind of do. So karma is real. It comes back. But in this way, it's good. We're just similar, and sometimes I see even the way I approach her as a person, not even as a player. For me, it's more like you have to let Marta be Marta. You cannot just what Gilles said, you cannot try to put her in a box because I think she should be a certain way. She wants to grow in so many different directions and she's interested in so many different things that, you have two options as a coach, right? You can either try to narrow it and be like, nope, these are not the things. Maybe you can take care of them later after your career. And now we just focus on tennis, but then she would explode. Or you can, nurture those things. And by nurturing it, doesn't necessarily mean that you need to follow each and every single one of them, but it means that you as a coach, or I as a coach, and as a person that's next to her through this time, I try to honor, that growth of her as a human being as well, not just as a player.
Yeah, that first of all, that's really funny that your mom's like, "Welcome to my world," raising you. This is funny. No, it makes total sense too. And I think part of it, you mentioned getting to know her, and we make the half joke, half truth though, that when these coaching player partnerships start, it's almost like starting a relationship. You have to know if you click, where the areas are, get to know someone. Without that foundation, you could speak to this. It's really hard. There's so many, Sandra, there's so many coaching player partnerships that get off on the wrong foot because they either don't know each other well enough or they want different things. So without getting to know each other and finding that compatibility, it could be doomed from the start.
Yeah, 100%. I think that when you spend so much time with someone on the court, but also on the road, it's you need to get along and you need to click. And obviously, you don't just, a player doesn't just rely on the coach when it comes to, technical things or tactical things, match stuff, but you travel, life happens, right? So you have all these other things that are included in that as well. So you need to be, yeah, you need to get along. I mean, I was really lucky. I feel like in my life that all the players that I worked with so far, I really had great connections with. And every time I feel like, okay, it cannot be better. It cannot be better. Like it's impossible. Like it will never happen again. But it keeps happening, and I love it because I don't see another way, honestly.
Right. Maybe you're the common denominator there, that it's all worked out because you've been coaching all these players. Who can say, really? But it is safe to say, I think most of the tennis world would agree that Marta is on the emotional side of things. There are times when she's very expressive, which in all seriousness can be good. Better to do that than bottle things up. But you're seeing Sandra as a steadying force, where she might look at you during the course of a match where it's teetering and you were that calming, influence. How is it? Because that's a fine line, right? Managing the emotions, a player that has emotions, that's fighting, that's passionate, but you don't want them to go overboard and get bogged down by negative thoughts. How has that process been helping Marta to manage her emotions?
Yeah, and I feel like, one thing about Marta is 100% she's an emotional player. She's an emotional person. And again, you can, as a coach, you can either try and change it and be like, okay, listen, now we're going to try to stop it altogether, or you can just, in a way, go along with it and try to show the player where those emotions are helpful and where they aren't, and hopefully you push that limit further and further, right, when those emotions come in. And I feel like that's what Marta's been doing really well, especially you could see this year. I mean, she's beaten some unbelievable players, and not just beaten them here and there, but consistently or in the same week. So I feel like she's learned also how to manage herself better on the court, which results in those emotions kicking in later. But obviously it's a process of discovery as well, because you have to feel out. You get some new tools, you try them, some of them work, some of them don't. So it's a process, and I feel like in my job as a coach is to try to make those things not make those things disappear, but make those things come later and later in the tournament, or later and later in matches, right? Or for them to happen less and less, but not necessarily, the goal is to change Marta as a person, or as an emotional player.
You made me think of something, because about 3 years ago, I had the chance to talk to Marta before you were in her orbit, and we were talking. She was rising. She just competed at Roland Garros, had that run, kind of introduced herself to the world. And I asked her what her goals were. And she said, maybe more direct than anybody that I've ever asked that question to. She said all 4 Grand Slams, and just looked dead center. So that's the goal. It was dead serious. Like, I want to win every major. Knowing what you just said, that progress is, perfection can be the enemy of progress. Has she gotten better in your mind of focusing on, okay, I have long-term goals. We're trying to win every match, but if we lose and we're trying stuff, there's still a bigger journey. There's a longer path. How is that process of looking down the road at some bigger goals, despite maybe losing some matches?
Yeah, for sure she's gotten better at it, but at the same time, we always love that Marta wants it all, and she's a perfectionist. And for her, so today, for example, we had a conversation about unforced errors, and I asked her what are unforced errors, and she said, well, sometimes if I miss a ball, she said like, it's tough to say, because sometimes if I hit a good shot but I miss it just by a little bit, it would count as an unforced error, but it really isn't. And I'm like, Marta, for you every error is an unforced error. And she started laughing, and she's like, yeah, I know, but I mean in general. So she's a perfectionist in that way. And I think that, again, it's a blessing and a curse at the same time. You just gotta use it. You just got to try to use it in your advantage, right? And I think all the great champions and great players are perfectionists. They would not be that good if they weren't, but they find a way to channel it a little bit better. So I definitely think that, she's channeling it better and better throughout the time. And is there still, a space to progress? Of course, in everything.
It's like a slight unforced error. It's like not fully unforced error. That's great. Well, yeah. And I think too, part of it is, the discovery process, knowing how they gel. Your job as a coach, any coach's job, is picking the player back up after tough losses. The story goes that, the San Diego final didn't go Marta's way. You guys go down to Indian Wells. It took you, by design or maybe naturally, and I wanted to talk to you about this, the decision to bring up the match. It's a tough topic, a final, an opportunity to win a trophy. Didn't go her way, but eventually you guys did talk it out. How is your approach with handling losses and knowing when to discuss some sensitive topics?
Um, I think first of all, you should always discuss sensitive topics like this after a loss when the emotions
Yeah,
go down already, So when the emotions are there, the conversation about the match is pointless because, yeah, the player is going to speak only from their emotional side, which, they cannot see anything rationally. And that's okay. Everybody needs time to cool off. And sometimes it takes shorter, sometimes it's longer. That's completely fine. For me as a coach, what I try not to look at any particular match. I try to look at patterns. So if we have things that keep happening in matches and she loses because of these things, then obviously that's something to pay attention to. As long as our trajectory is going up, with
yeah,
little downs, but as long as it's going up in the long run, that's really what I care about. So that's what I always try to also portray to Marta. And when you're a player, it's not easy because of course you want
yeah.
to see results right away. You want to win everything. Let's be
Right.
real, right? But that's not always the case. So I always try to be, the voice of reason a little bit, and show her the things where she's doing better, the things that are kicking in, and maybe they are not entirely there yet, but they are already paying off a little bit in matches. Maybe they don't make her win yet, but the trajectory is upwards, and as long as it's there, I think that's the most important, and that's also how you can, as a coach, calm a player down in those moments that are difficult.
Not letting it snowball is the mark of a great coach, and she bounced back, had another successful run that season and beyond. And taking it a little further back, Sandra, did you feel like going into 2024 after the offseason, after getting to know each other, that it could be special, not just in Australia, but that the year ahead she makes that run, Australian Open, gets to the quarters? But did you think that could be a special season based on getting that full offseason with her?
Well, Marta wants to win all four Grand Slams, right?
Yeah,
You know that already, and I
yeah,
know it too, and I want to win as well. So in some way, it's what we work for, right? It's not like it's
yeah,
an expectation because you never know when those things are going to happen, but it's what you work for. So when these things come, you are just, it's a confirmation of the work that you've done. And I think that's
yeah.
beautiful. That's all that we work for. But are we expecting it? It's there. I don't think there is one answer to that. In a way,
Right,
yes. And at the same time, no,
right.
because, yeah.
I guess part of what I was curious about is because the players, coaches, but obviously players, which you were yourself too, they know when the level of somebody is a guy or girl is there. So I guess another way to ask it was, did you realize that her level was getting to a point where, okay, this isn't just flash in the pan. Like we know about the all the weapons that she had and the prospect that she was, but did it get to a point where you're like, okay, her level is at the level where she can be competing at the top, which she clearly did last year.
Yeah, I think, her level was there actually already way before as well, but she was just very inconsistent. So she
Mhm.
could play a great couple of games and then
Yeah,
a terrible couple of games, right? And it was just fluctuating too much. And I think this year, sorry, finally we got it to a point where it's a little bit more even, it's a little bit more stable. And with that, we were able to also improve some of the things. And,
yeah.
and then, boom, that's it.
Yeah, it's funny how that works. We got more with Sandra Zaniewska here on Tennis Channel Inside and talking to Marta Kostyuk's coach, who's done phenomenal stuff with the young Ukrainian player who is number 17 in the world and ready for more. For some of the serious stuff too. And I ask you this question, wondering how you're going to answer it and how you view yourself. But do you see yourself as a trendsetter and a groundbreaker because you're one of the few women coaches coaching a female player at the very top of the game? There's been a demand for more females to be in positions like you're in. Do you consider yourself a little bit of a groundbreaker given, the role that you have and how you're succeeding at it?
Honestly, I don't, but I feel like that's because, I never really planned on coaching, and then suddenly what happened with Petra, it was like, one in a billion situation, right?
Yeah,
Like nobody gets into coaching this way as
right.
I did. So I was very fortunate in that, and I'm so happy and so grateful because otherwise I don't even know if I would be here on this level, right?
Mhm.
But I do realize, that yeah, the female coaching situation is a topic that's important. That's also you hear about it a lot right now. I'm happy that players are want more female coaches. I think that's great.
Yeah.
It's not to say that female coaches are better than male, not at all. I think it's just it depends. A player needs to click with a coach and vice versa. And sometimes for some players, female coaches might work a
Yeah.
little bit better than male, and that's it. So I think that, if we can bring in more of them
Yeah.
eventually into the field, and if I could be a part of that, that would be, amazing.
Yeah, that last part especially true, right? It's not saying that it should only be female coaches coaching women, but certain players, and Marta has openly said it, like I just thrive on that female perspective where you're able to communicate better, and it's really special, and it's cool to see too, because again, sorry that you're no longer on the 30 and under club, but still one of the very young coaches coming up. So there's still a lot more in your journey, and that's another way to look at it, right? A coach's journey is a lot like a player's. There's lessons learned, there's progress, there's ups and downs. So it's not like you start coaching and you're automatically at the top. There's still a lot of learning. I'm sure you would agree.
Yeah, 100%. There's, you always learn with each and every single player. And just as you were saying it, I was thinking, what is the biggest lesson that I've learned with Marta this year? And just one word comes to mind, and it's patience. Like I
Mhm.
realized that I am actually trying to teach Marta how to be patient on court
Yeah,
and, with the expectations. But at the same time, I feel like I need that lesson too, like in a way we both need
right.
it, because there are some things that go faster and some things that you just need to wait for, and that's it, and it's
Yeah.
not going to speed up.
I do think it's also cool. I want to point out that you're part of the trend setting group, Unbox, that's got representation as coaches. I know your position right now is a very great one. It's coaching a premier player. You guys have a great relationship, but unfortunately, we know, and you know this too, the coaching side of things can be a little cutthroat. So it's good that the coaches are banding together and getting some representation going forward.
Yeah, I think it's great. The idea of Unbox, it's what Yannick, the CEO, already told me about 2 years ago or so. So way before it was created, he gave me the idea, and I was like, wow, the idea is amazing. It's just, can
Yeah.
you put it together and make it work? Because I feel like if coaches have a bit more representation, the sport is going to
Yeah.
it's just going to be better for tennis, really. It's going to be better for tennis, for the fans, for everyone, really. And of course, not
Yeah.
it's not to that we need to take anything away from the players, because at the end of the day, it's the players that go and hit the balls, and they are the superstars, as they should be, right? But
Right.
then you have all those teams and the people that really live the players' lifestyle with them in a way,
Yeah.
and travel and are there with them all the time. So yeah, if the coaches can get a little bit more not really recognition, but in some way, yes, more opportunities, I would say, that is just going to elevate the sport further, I feel like.
It's going to help the players too, which is huge. You're going to have better, more crisp, centrally focused coaches, and the level is going to get better, which is a win-win for everyone, as they say. Also, have to point out, you're a published author. You wrote 2 books, and I'm going to read the titles now: Coaching 2.0: How to Develop Great Female Players on and Off the Court, and Raising Champions: The Ultimate Guide for Tennis Parents. So, starting there, how cool is it? How important is it for you to be a published author? Something maybe you dreamed of as a little girl.
Yes, I dreamt of it way before I even picked up a tennis racket. I was just a couple of years old. I wrote an essay that it got A+, and my mom was so proud of me at the time, where I was like, wow, this is it. I want to write a book one day. And yeah, that's how it came about. The first one was during COVID. A friend of mine asked me if I know of any books that could help, female no, sorry, coaches that coach female players, a little bit of the perspective. And I said, no, but she was a female coach as well. And I said, listen, why don't we write one? And she was
Yeah.
like, there we go. You always wanted to write a book. Here you have the idea. And it was brewing in my head for about a year before it finally came out. And yeah, I was very happy with that book. And then the second one, it was the same. The idea just came to me when I worked at the Muratoglu Academy, and in my role, I was dealing with a lot of young players and their parents. And even though those players were one of the best players in the world already in their obviously age categories, the parents knew so little about how the whole journey looks like. And I was like, okay, if those parents know so little, then what about all the other parents, right? That, their kids are just starting, or they don't know anything about the sport whatsoever. And I felt like something like this needs to be out there, and that took actually much longer. That was probably brewing in my head for about 1.5 years before I started writing. And yeah, then when I quit the academy and before starting working with Marta, I wrote that one. So
Wow.
there it is.
Two different perspectives and really cool perspectives too. It's very fun to see as we wind this conversation down here on Tennis Channel Inside In. Next year, I mean, this year coming up, 2025 could be a big one for Marta. There's players that are competing at the top of the game. She's established herself as one of them. What are some of the goals and things you hope to accomplish as a team next year?
Well, we never really set ranking goals. So, that's always what I say. That's something that happens on the side of doing good work. And so, yeah, I mean, obviously, in the back of our mind, there's a Grand Slam, one day. I don't know if it's next year or further down the road, but again, is it an expectation? Yes and no, right? So this is what we want. This is the dream. Mm, But the goal really is to keep progressing on the court, staying healthy, and having fun. Really having fun and growing as a person and as a player, and really making great memories and having great adventures.
Yeah, you've said, and I think it's perfectly stated, that the best coaches build the best people too. It's not just about on the court. And I think we're seeing that. Marta doing great work, obviously, with their foundation and the Marta Kostyuk Foundation helping Ukrainian youth out. And then also just building high character people. It's going to help your tennis too, which is how I put it too. Is like if you build a high character person, their tennis will also shine brightly too.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with that. And I live by that and I coach by that.
Well, I wanted to ask you as well. We know about the authorship, which again, it's just funny, right? You said your mom was so proud when you wrote that essay. Probably more proud. It's funny how that works. Right? Probably more proud than any tennis accomplishment. She was proud of the A+ you got on writing.
Yeah, I mean, this is at least how I remember it.
Yeah,
But tennis, I mean, my parents never pushed me into tennis at all. So it's always like, they were like, if you don't want to play and you want to stop, you can do it any second.
So I had things that I want to ask you before I let go, just the interest. So I see, in doing some research, you like to go to the beaches. You're a big fan of dogs. Also skateboarding like your brother kind of did a little bit. I've seen some of that. And also jumping out of airplanes. Is that really, you like to parachute out of airplanes as well?
Well, this is just one story. I was very afraid of heights when I was a kid. Like, I was terrified. And one day, also, I was really young. I don't remember how old, but I decided that one day, if I jump out of an airplane, the fear of heights will be gone. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do it one day. And then, I didn't do it. And when I was 28, I was like, okay, I need to do it, because I'm not going to do it when I'm 50, that's for sure. And I was working at the time with Aliza Cornet, and we went to New Zealand. It was beginning of the year. It's my birthday on January 3rd. So we had a day off on the day, and I said, listen, I'm going to go and jump out of the airplane. And Aliza was like, why? And I'm like, because, I have this fear of heights and I feel like I'm going to get rid of it this way. And she goes, but it makes no sense. And then when I thought of it, I'm like, yeah, she's actually right. It makes no sense. But in my head, it made all the sense. And it was really gone the second I jumped out of the airplane, which was scary as like crazy. But it was gone. Like, I'm not afraid of heights at all. I started rock climbing after, I'm really much better in planes as well. Like, no issue.
Wow.
So it worked.
That's the first case of just basically bullying a fear of heights out of your body. You're just like, I'm going to just conquer this with the most extreme thing possible, not walking up to the top of like a big building. No, we're going to just jump out of an airplane.
Yeah, it took me like probably 20 years to do that, but done it. And I would do it again.
That's more tennis problem solving right there. That's what that is. Sandra Zaniewska, always a pleasure. This was fun getting to chat with you here on the podcast. I'm, excited for not just what you're doing on the court, but off of it as well. You build a great foundation for Marta Kostyuk of her game, building a high character person, also a published author. So all the best, Sandra, going forward. It was a blast to chat with you here on Tennis Channel Inside In. We'll have to do it again soon. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you, Mitch. Until next time.